Thank you for having me here today. It's really great to see that all these athletes continuing to talk about their practice and become better at what they're doing. This is such an uncertain time. I know with our team, it's definitely coming together and talking on Zoom has been amazing to have this, but it's also hard. So it's really cool to see 65 of you here tonight. And hopefully we'll have a good conversation. I'm going to share my screen here just to kind of guide myself along the way. Hold on one second. Okay, share. All right, and let's do in the present view. Okay, so I wanted to start a little bit about myself, just giving you a little bit of background because a lot of you probably have no idea who I am, and I just wanted to share with you a little bit about myself and my journey. I started running when I was 8 years old, so you can see this picture of me over here on the left, this little one over here. And I started running because my parents were runners, but they didn't start running until they had my sister and I. So they just ran for health and wellness. They weren't competitive runners, but we lived a block away from this wonderful park in Portland called Forest Park. And so we would see our parents every morning go out for runs just for fun. And the way it kind of worked in Portland is everyone did soccer in the fall, everyone did basketball in the winter, and then everyone did track in the spring, surprisingly. So I ran for a club called Portland Track Club. And we had so much fun, and it wasn't about competing. It was just about another youth sport. And so that was really cool in itself. We played blob tag. We played capture the flag. I did the long jump. I did the 400. I always finished last, but I loved it. I fell in love with the sport at a really early age. And slowly as time moved on, I started to get a little bit better. And by the time I finished my youth running by 8th grade, I had won 6 national junior Olympic titles. And during that time, I still loved it. It was so much fun. And I felt this joy of traveling around with my family to meets. And I didn't feel any pressure. Then I headed off to high school at Lincoln High School, and I was pretty lucky that my youth coach was also the local high school coach. So it was a very seamless transition. And when I got to high school, I continued to progress. We had a fabulous team. At one point, we were ranked 7th in the country, and this is in the early 90s, so this is a long time ago. But we were ranked 7th in the country. I ended up winning 6 state titles. We didn't have NXN back then. It was just Foot Locker, so everyone tried to qualify for Foot Locker, and I was able to qualify all 3 times that I was there, and I represented the USA team on 2 junior world championship teams. So then college came along, and I was trying to decide where to go, and I really wanted to leave the state of Oregon just because I'd been here my entire life. But part of me was like, why would I not run at Oregon? Like Prefontaine and all these great, wonderful track history, Nike being started there. And so I fought it forever because I was a runner who very much fought the identity of being a runner. I really wanted to be Marie. I didn't want to be a runner. And so going to Oregon felt like for me that I was going to Oregon to run. But I came to my senses, and I was like, I kind of am going to college to run. Like I'm going to do all these other things, but I am going to college to run. So I decided to go to Oregon and had the best time. We were successful. My freshman year, we were one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country in cross country. I ended up being a 6-time All-American. And following that, I don't have an image here because it was a shorter career, but for about 5 or 6 years, I ran for Nike, and I ran for a team called the Nike Farm Team, which was based out of Palo Alto, and they moved it up later to Eugene and called it Oregon Track Club. So then that was 2004, and I took a big hiatus from competing. I've run my whole life. I live right near the park, so I run on Wildwood Trail in Forest Park multiple days a week. And I continued my teaching career. I've been a 1st and 2nd grade teacher for 19 years. And a couple years ago, I decided to work part-time. And when I was working part-time to help raise my children, I realized that I was just missing something in the running world. So I reached out to my high school that I went to, Lincoln High School, and I said, hey, would anyone need a volunteer? And they said, absolutely, come on in. So I started volunteering 2 days a week, and that's turned to 6 days a week. I now have been there for 2.5 years. We have a wonderful team. We have a fabulous head coach who I feel really honored to work with. We've been really successful. We've podiumed the last 2 years. I've been there for cross. Last year we made it to NXN as an at-large team. So I feel like we've had really great success, and we have just awesome girls, awesome boys as well. I've also, as Chuck mentioned, I started something called Girls Talk, where I'm talking with my team and talking with other teams about critical topics. And I've started a company called Wildwood Running with my co-founder, Robin. And it's just been a dream to be able to get back in this world and talk about females as runners. I didn't want to share all this with you to like brag about my success or to boost what I've done, but I wanted to talk to you about this because I have been where you are. I have been injured. I have dealt with issues of pressure, mental health. I've dealt with anything that you guys have dealt with. I've probably been there. And if I haven't dealt with it, I've had a teammate who has. So in that regard, I wanted to share kind of this journey with you to let you know that part of who I am is this journey, and it's created who I am today. But what I want to do is I want to go back to each of these images again, and I want to share my why I was running during these times of my life. When you look at the youth, it was simply for fun. It was for family time. It was fun. We'd travel around to meets. It didn't have anything to do with competition. Then when I moved into high school, it became more of a community. I wanted to make new friends. Track was one way to do that. Cross country was one way to do that. But I also started to get competitive. I enjoyed competing against other people. I enjoyed pushing my limits. Then when I got to college, it continued to be the community, making friends, not only with track people, but also as an athlete, developing friendships with people in other sports. But then I became even more competitive. I wanted to win championships. I wanted to beat some people. I'll be honest, like I had that drive, and I was also really proud of who I was. I was proud of the work I put in. So my why was being proud of myself and really wanting to compete. And now as a coach, my running journey is very different. I run for solitude. I run for mental health. I run to be away from my kids. It's really my time to think. And so it's a very different avenue. But the reason I was sharing that with you is I hope all of you have a pen and a writing utensil, because what I would love for you to do today is I would love for you to think about why you run. And I want to give you about a minute or two just to write down on a piece of paper why you run and think about that. So I'll give you about a minute or two. All right. So one of the reasons I'm having you write down why you run is because that should be the basis of everything you do with your running. You should always come back to, why am I here? Why do I want to do this? And I think it's imperative for people to really understand why they're runners and why they're doing their sport or why they're doing anything in life. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because it's important for you to understand that. So I also want you to think about this next question. Where do you see yourself in 15 years, maybe even 20 years? And it could be as a person, as a career, it could be as a runner, however you want to think about that. Okay, so the reason I had you think about those two things today is because hopefully in 15 years, you still see yourself as a runner. But as a runner, you may be a different type of runner. And I want to put that perspective in place because it's easy for someone like me who's 43 years old to say, oh, it's easy to get lost on your journey. It's easy to get overwhelmed in your journey when I'm out of it. But what you guys are going through has so much impact on your life because you have all these different things coming at you. Not only are you dealing with a pandemic, with which all of us have never dealt with before, but you have social influences, you have schoolwork, you have parents, you have siblings, you have friends, you have so many different things in your life that are pulling you that I think it's imperative for you to figure out, where do you see yourself in 15 years? Because what's so important to you in this moment might not be what's as important to you in 15 years. So sometimes it takes a step back to be able to reflect on your practice. So today what I want to do is I want to talk to you guys about some of the topics I addressed during Girls Talks. And we're not going to actually be able to do a Girls Talk because I can't see any of you, but we're going to have a chance to talk about some of those topics. And then and hopefully you'll be able to reflect along the way. So I wanted to give you a couple stats before we get going. Oh, there it is. So when you think about female athletes, I think these are pretty profound stats. By the age of 14, girls are dropping out of sports twice the rate of boys. And by age 17, after most girls have gone through puberty, more than half of girls, 51%, will have quit sports. And when I look at those, I think that's sad. Like, that's really sad. I was talking to actually a Nike executive a couple weeks ago, and she started crying. She was like, this is what we want to change. We want to help girls realize that they can be in sports for the rest of their life. And just because they're going through puberty, just because their body may be changing, it's still okay to stick with sports. I think there's a couple reasons this happened. One is that at going through puberty, sometimes it can be hard for some people as their bodies change. I think another one is, you know, when you get to high school, a lot of the sports become cut sports besides like cross country, like you either make the team or you don't. And then I also think there's other issues, like maybe you're specializing in something, like maybe you're in theater or dance, so you can't do sports recreationally because of the demand. But I do think the biggest reason is because of girls' bodies are changing in a different way than boys' bodies are changing at this time. So what I'm here to say to you guys today, as a female, as someone who's still in sports, it's totally worth it. It's worth it because I feel more confident about myself. I have an outlet. I can go be on my own. I can test my ability if I want to. And I have a community. I have a community of friends who are runners as well. But I'm also here to say that your journey that you're at right now could be challenging. It can be hard, especially as runners when your body is taking a toll. So we're going to talk about that today. And then I also want you to appreciate that your journey is your journey. And what we talk about today, what I say today might not apply to you, but it might. So take everything kind of with a grain of salt. I love this picture, and I'll get to this picture in a second. But the heading here says we must be strong in mind and body. And when I think of that, I think of you as an athlete, and it's most important and it's imperative for you to think of yourself as a female first and a runner second, because running in this capacity, in a competitive capacity, might not be who you always are. So you need to develop yourself as a female first and really understand who you are. This is a girl on our team named Sophie, and I think she embodies mind and body, and you can see this in her face right here as well. She was probably our number 9 runner at the beginning of the season, and then moved up to our 8. And then by the time we got an at-large bid to NXN, she was our number 7 runner. And so she came to NXN, and she's one of those girls who would find the time to seek out myself or Eric Detman or anyone. Eric Detman's our head coach, or any of the girls on the team, and just talk. She wanted to talk about how she could be mentally tough. And as you can see in this picture, she's already got it, but she worked on it and she worked on it. And she really believed in understanding her mind as well as her body. When she was at NXN, she was like, I just feel great to have the opportunity to be here as our number 7 runner. She ended up being our number 5 runner. And if she wasn't there, who knows how we would have done, because her being our number 5 runner really carried the weight and helped us with our points. So today we're going to really talk about ways you can think about yourself, ways you can understand how your body might be changing, and ways how you can embrace those changes to be a successful runner. the first thing or the next thing I want to say is I want to remind you that I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a scientist or a physician. I'm just a runner. I'm a mom. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I'm someone who cares. And so all of this information is coming from what I've learned along the way. But if there's more specific advice, I'd be happy to answer, but sometimes I'm not going to know the answers to. Specialists are more important. So today we're going to talk about puberty. We're going to talk about periods, getting your menstrual cycle, athletic identity. We're going to talk about having confidence in yourself. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how it's important to have some girls' talks. Okay. So the one thing I want to start talking with you about is it's important for you to know what your body might do. You're all going to go through puberty, but you're all going to go through it in a completely different way. And it's important for you to know that what happens to you might not happen to someone else. And it's important for you to understand what could happen so that along the way, you're not necessarily doing things to hurt your body. You're really taking care of yourself. So the first bullet there says boys versus girls. And this is something I never knew until way after my running career. And I knew it, but it wasn't spoken to me. And that is that boys and girls navigate puberty in a different way. Boys, when they hit puberty, they are pumped full of testosterone, which is muscle building mass. So they're getting big, they're getting strong, they're getting fast. When girls hit puberty, they are being pumped full of estrogen, which is fat building mass. So we are gaining more fat where they might be gaining more muscle. Now, some of us are like, that's not fair. Why is that happening? Well, it's happening because our bodies are being built to have babies, right? Our bodies are being built to someday, if we choose to carry a child. And so that's how our bodies are different. There's some different physical changes along the way for females. For example, you're going to grow taller. You're going to gain more weight. There's no doubt about it. Your hips are going to widen. Your hips will widen because of, preparing your body to birth children. And so there will be some changes along the way. Some people won't notice those changes because they'll slowly occur over many years. For example, my sister, I think grew 6 inches in 8 months or something. And I will tell you, her legs, she was always sore. She always was getting injured. She just grew a lot really fast, whereas I grew a lot slower. I still grew a lot. In high school, I probably gained 20 pounds. I probably grew 4 inches, but it was a slower process, so it wasn't as noticeable. She had all those growing aches and stuff. And then the emotional changes, when with new hormones in your body, you're emotionally going to feel different. Your emotions are going to ebb and flow more than they have before. The way you deal with things might be harder. As you're approaching your menstrual cycle or when the time of the month when you get your period, you're going to notice your feelings even different. And so there's also some possible performance effects. And I think this is really important to know. Usually prepubescent, before you have before you get your period and before you hit puberty, you might see more of a linear path. Not necessarily, but most people see more of a linear path. But then as you're going through puberty, sometimes girls will see their performances plateau a little bit. Sometimes they may even see their performances regress a little bit. And a lot of times they don't know why. I was talking to my girls about this exact topic and they were like, this makes so much sense to me. My sophomore year or my junior year, I grew a bunch and my performance has changed. I was definitely going through puberty. I had no idea that was happening. So I think it's important for you to understand, and this is where I really want you to listen, that your path is going to be bumpy and it's okay. To understand that you're going to have some peaks and some valleys is natural. And to know that as soon as you get out of puberty, you're still going to have those, but it'll probably level off a little bit more. Now, not everyone's the same. Some people will cruise through and it'll feel linear, but you might notice times where it's not. I know that when I plateaued a bit, I was able to PR, but it was by halves of a second each year. Maybe a second each year. Maybe it was 2 seconds each year. And I didn't really know why I wasn't having the 10 seconds this year, 10 seconds this year, 10 seconds this year kind of growth. And so now in hindsight, I know exactly what was happening with my body. And then your menstrual cycle. As you're getting your period, I remember the first time I got my period, I was so upset. I was like, well, I shouldn't say the first time, but as I was getting my period, I would get horrible cramps. I would bleed a lot. I felt so uncomfortable. My stomach always hurt. It was something I just didn't appreciate and didn't want. But as I got used to it and comfortable with it, it's something I was able to navigate. Now there's so much more information on our menstrual cycle and how we can use it to kind of help us. But we're going to talk a little bit more about our period in just a couple minutes. The last bullet I really want to talk to you about as you're entering and going through puberty is that it really lasts for quite a while. It's 2 to 4 years. I had always heard 1 to 2 years, but people are now starting, scientists, doctors, physiologists are starting to say it's more like 2 to 4 years. And your puberty starts before you get your period and it carries on way after, but it's the whole time that your body is really changing. So what I want you to know is all those things that I just mentioned might be things that you might have happen, but they might not as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. So I guess if there's anything I want you to listen to, this is it right here. A lot of times when girls are heading through puberty and their body is changing and their performances start to plateau, or maybe they're dipping a little bit, they do things to fight their body. They don't understand that this is what's happening. They might start running more. You know, we always say, right? The more you do, or the more you put in, or the more you'll get out of it. And in running, that's not always necessarily true. So it's important to realize that if you're fighting your body, if you're like, okay, I'm not as fast, I'm going to try running more and more. Oh, and then maybe instead of running, 9-minute pace on my easy days, now I'm going to run 8-minute pace on my easy days, and trying to push that isn't going to help you along the way. It's just going to do more harm. Same with under eating. A lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm gaining more weight, which you should be gaining more weight, but I need to figure out a way to not gain more weight. And so they're under eating. They're cutting their calories. They're going on diets. They're cutting out certain foods. One thing you need to know is if you're going to sit down and have a meal with your friends who are non-athletes, your meal should look extremely different. You should have a lot more food. And we'll talk about that in a second. Some people who fight their periods do stop, and we will talk about that more, but having a period stop is a big sign that something's off. It doesn't always mean that you're fighting your body. It could be other things, but if you're someone who has a regular period and then the season hits and you lose your period, that's a sign that there's something going on with your training that's not helping you. Amenorrhea is when you lose your period for 3 months or longer. And when that happens, you are doing some damage to your body. Your bone growth isn't happening, which is when you're getting your period and you're at this age, you are growing, your bone density is occurring, and it only occurs for a certain amount of your life. So if you're not getting your periods, that's not happening. I had a teammate who is one of my dearest friends who had a tough time in high school in this regard. She wasn't getting her period. She's now an Ironman. She's fantastic. But if she runs more than 20 miles a week, she will get a stress fracture. She has hurt herself in the long run because of what she did in high school. So that's the bone health. And then also when you're fighting your body and you're not giving it what you need, you will see more injuries. If you're overtraining, you're under eating, you're not getting your period, you're doing more things than you should be because you're trying to counter how your body is changing, there is a chance that you will get injured. So I want to share with you now how to embrace your body. And the number one thing, and this is why I had you write down your why, is to remember your why. Why are you really here? Are you really here only to beat people? Are you here only to get faster? Or are you here for that journey? Are you here because you love it and the community and the sense of commitment and the sense of performing at your best? So I really want you to be able to remember that why, because then when you're starting to think, what should I do? How should I act? That why might counterbalance your thinking. And we talked about this, a nonlinear path is okay. I think that one thing I want to give you guys is that all girls' paths are going to go up and down, boys as well, but girls more so. So it's important for you to really understand that that's going to happen. I had a girl on our team this year, and she just did everything she could. And she was just like, I can't do anymore. My body just doesn't want it. And she looked at me and she goes, I'm having a hard time because of puberty, do you think? And I said, possibly. We don't really know, but possibly. And she's like, I'm just going to keep on. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing so that I can make sure that I'm creating a healthy atmosphere. Positive food relationships. I mean, to me, this is the number one. I think that, how do I say this eloquently? It is, you guys are in high school. It's important for you to enjoy food. Like, you are running, you're athletic, you're working hard, you should eat what you want to eat. And it's important that you're building that relationship with food, because if you're starting off by being too strict on your diet, being too much of a runner, or following what, elite athletes are eating, is not right for you. Elite athletes have already gone through puberty. Elite athletes are doing this as a job. They have maintained and are managing a very strict regimen of food. So I want to make sure that you guys know that eat what you feel, enjoy food. It's probably the best advice I can give you, so it doesn't harm your relationships with food later. Strength and mobility is huge. About 2 years ago, we had about 8 girls who just kept having these little nagging hip injuries. And we were talking about what's going on. Why do we think this is happening? And then we were like, it's probably because they're all growing, right? Your hips are widening. So your Q angle, that's the angle of your hips to your knees, starts to go in at a different rate now because your hips are wider. And so we decided, okay, let's incorporate hip mobility. And so we have all the girls every day do our strength and mobility exercises, and the boys do as well, but they're very, very, focused on hips, because that's what we were dealing with. We are a school that's in downtown Portland. So we're really close to the forest, but you have to go like 1.5 miles straight up to get to the forest. So we run a lot of our mileage on a track and a lot of our mileage on the sidewalks. And so, that pounding can be hard. So getting that strength and mobility, it was really important for us. And then also, I think, to embrace your body, if you're only focusing on the performance, you're not focusing on the process of it, then I think you might lose out on being able to manage some of these obstacles that you might have. So thinking about, this is part of my process. This is something I'm going through in my life, whether it's easy or whether it's hard. It's growing you as a female. It's growing you as a person as well as a runner. And then I think it's important to take time to talk about it. So a lot of you said that you never have these conversations or sometimes have these conversations. It's really important for you to start talking about this with coaches, with your teammates, with your parents, helping people understand. 2 of my friends just came out with a great book. It's called Girls Running. It's by Melody Fairchild and Elizabeth Carey. It's called, it's All You Need to Strive, Thrive, and Run Your Best. And it's really about training, fueling your body, cross-training, and building your team. So it's really focusing on what girls your age are going through, and I highly recommend it. It just came out like last week, so I've only dabbled through it, but that's another way to talk about it. And then the last thing is to be a good teammate. There are going to be times where you're going like this and a teammate's going like this, and it's hard. It's hard to see that, but you can still be a good teammate, because that trajectory might change, and then you're going up and they're going down, or something happens, within our own lives. So it's really important to continue being a great teammate along the way. I see some questions coming in, but we will do that at the end. So periods, simply put, you need to have them. And some of the research I've read is you need to have your period every month. I have never missed a period in my life except when I was pregnant. And so it's really important that that is happening. But you also need to know that if you haven't gotten your period by the time you're 16, it's probably important to talk to a doctor. If you're not getting in them regularly, I would make sure you let your coach know, because they need to understand. So maybe your training needs to be adjusted, but definitely you need to get into your doctor and talk to them about that. And make sure, I was talking to a girl last week, make sure that you're getting to a doctor who really understands what it is to be a runner, an endurance athlete, because I think that's imperative as well. But yeah, you need to be having your periods. We talked about amenorrhea. If you're not getting 3 periods, if you're missing 3 periods in a row, that can do some damage. The other thing I like to tell girls is, I've seen it on our team. We'll have a girl who's running 25 miles a week who gets her period like clockwork. We have a girl who's running 25 miles per week and she misses her period for like 6 months or something. So we're all different on how that works. This girl has been talking with a doctor. She's been trying to change her diet. She's been doing other things to figure out, what do I need to do? Like, what is my body missing? It might not be a running component. It might be, but how is that going to help me? So she's really keeping track of it. A lot of our girls keep track of their cycles. I always did in my running log. I just put a little period, like a big dot, on the day that I got my period. And for me, it helped because it helped me know, like with racing season and just making sure I had tampons and things like that. Cramps, I would always take ibuprofen, probably way too much. So I didn't know that at the time, because I would get the worst cramps. So it helped me know when my period was coming, and it also helped me see that it was regular. Now there's so much research on how to train with your period, and that is remarkable. And so tracking your period can help you in that way too. But then you've got to talk about your period. You know, I've been on a lot of calls, with coaches, and mostly male coaches, and they want to talk about it. They just want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable. And so talking about your periods with any coaches, talking about them with your teammates is really important. Having period health, taking away period stigma, that it's a hard conversation, is something that's really important as well. So I want to talk about identity. And the first thing I wrote here is, you really get to make the decisions about who you are going to be. Your identity is your choice. Now, there's some things that are cultural. There's some societal things that obviously play into our identities, family traditions, things like that as well. And that's very important. But there's also some things you get to choose. When I look at this group of girls, they're all great runners. They're wonderful human beings. We have 5 of those girls are full IB. IB is like AP courses. I'm not sure what you guys have. 2 of them are partial IB. One of them has lived in 5 countries. Another one lives on a farm, and she breeds cows and competes in horse competitions, not like where she rides horses, but where she shows her horses. 3 of them also play soccer in the fall. One of them has a mask making business where she now makes masks and sells them to raise money for the NAACP. So they're just wonderful people, and they've created this identity that's imperative. So what I want to share with you guys today is an activity created by this wonderful woman named Kara Bazzi, and she's the founder of the Opal Food and Body Wisdom company, and they're based in Seattle, and you can go to their website because they've got some really great things. But she did this activity with myself and a bunch of coaches, and so in a second I'm going to have you get out a piece of paper. But what she has people do is she has them make a pie chart creating their identity. And this was one of her clients, and her client said that her main identity was skating. Ice skating. And then she has 2 different relationships. She has her relationships in skating, which is the light blue. And then she has relationships like friendships, which is non-skating, and that was the yellow. And then she identified herself as a student. And then she was really focusing on food and body. So this was an eating disorder clinic that she was going through. So she was trying to kind of create a identity that was more healthy. So if you look at her identity, if you look at the 2 blues and you look at the green, that's all kind of her identity around skating and body image for her skating. And so it's really important to see that if you have a huge chunk of your identity in one area, it can be really hard if that gets taken away. So I created my own identity charts, and I want to show you. So I thought back to college. And if you look, the one when it says go Ducks, running was a huge piece of my identity. I'll admit it. Like, I ran a lot. I spent a lot of time with my running friends. I traveled for running, for track, for cross country, a little bit of indoor track. I ran 6 days a week. I had workouts 3 days a week. I had running friends. It was a big piece of my identity. But if you see the yellow part, my social, my friendships, like that was huge for me. Being able to be with my friends, go to movies, do college age social things as well. That was a big piece for me. And then I had other little things, like I was a daughter, I have a sister, I was in school, and I love to travel. So travel was another big piece. And I was pretty lucky in college that I never really got injured. I got injured twice for about a week. I did get injured later in life, more significantly. But when running went away from me in college, I still had other things. I had a big chunk of my life was social. And so I still had that piece. But if running had gone away from me for good, my identity would have totally had to shift. And if my running went away and my social went away, I would have these small little slivers that would be really hard for me to fall back on, right? Because they're not big in my life. So if you look at my life now, my identity is a little bit more whole. I'm a mom and a coach. Those are probably my two biggest things. My friendships are extremely important to me. Being a teacher is extremely important. Travel is still important. Running is there in my life, just in a different capacity. And I'm also a wife. And I think that at first my wife piece was a lot bigger, and then we had kids and it shrunk down. But if I look at these things and I think about, for example, COVID right now, right? You take my coaching away, you take my friends away, you take my teaching, being with my students. I taught online, but that's not any fun. And you take my travel away, my pie is pretty small, but at least I have 3 decent things to fall back on. So for example, if I couldn't coach anymore and you took that away, I'd still have really good pieces of my identity. So you might guess what I'm going to have you do right now for that next 3 or 4 minutes is please make a circle, and I'd like you to make a pie chart of your life. And I would like you to make it pre-COVID. So, because COVID's kind of restricted things. So make it as if we weren't in a pandemic right now. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes for that. Oops. Okay, I'll give you that 1 more minute. Okay. So what I hope that you got from this is a sense of who you are. And what I hope you're able to see is that there are some parts that you could probably work on. I even look at mine today and realize, there are some things. I look at my wife, little slice, and I'm like, I should not show my husband this piece. So there are things I can work on to help create my identity and help make sure that I'm working on it. So hopefully you were able to reflect on this a little bit and think, is there something that's really big and then a ton of tiny? Because if you take out that big piece and you only have such small things to fall back on. So making sure your identity is whole, making sure your identity is something you're really proud of is really important as well. Okay, I want to move on to I think it's the last part I have. So I put this book up in the corner. It's called Strong, and it's written by Kara Goucher. And I use this for one of our girls' talks on building confidence with my girls. It's a fabulous book for high schoolers. You can write in it. I couldn't find my copy here, but you can write in it. You can create, our girls, we created our own confidence journals where we decorated them, and I had a plan on how I wanted them to lay them out. But she talks about 9 different confidence techniques, and these are them listed on the side. But this is the time where you get to decide who you're going to be. And being confident doesn't mean being cocky, right? I was extremely shy person. I wasn't one to stand out in front of people. I didn't like attention on myself, but I was definitely inside confident. Running helped me be confident and helped me learn a lot about myself. So these are things that can help you be confident, not only as a runner, but also as a human being. So positive self-talk is extremely important. When I was in high school, all I said, I'm going to look at my notes here, but all I said to myself was PST. And if my teammates, if we'd pass each other, we'd just say PST. And each of us had something in our head. And mine was always relax your shoulders. And mine was always up on your toes. It was just something that cued my running form, and it got me to feel more relaxed when I was feeling really tired. So different people have different things that might cue themselves. So if you have something, maybe write that down right now, because that would be something you can do in workouts. You can do it while you're on a run, trying to get back in shape, while you're racing. Mantras. I've never been a big mantra person, but people love them. Our team has a mantra, and it's love your teammates. So right now, people write LYT, love your team, and that's their mantra. And so they'll write it on their shoes, they'll write it on their arms, they'll hashtag it when they put posts on social media. It's just become kind of our mantra. And what it means is I'm doing this not only for me, but I'm doing it for my team. I have a girl who on our team, the one I showed you the picture, who was running in at NXN, she, her mantra is brave, and she wants to take more risks and be brave. So she has her shoes decorated with it. She has her arms in Sharpie. It's pretty cool. Setting goals. This is really important, and it's important that you actually write your goals down, because it's so easy to say them in your head and go away. I used to meet with my coach every year in high school at the local restaurant, and I would write my goals down on usually the napkin in the restaurant. And then I would take that, and it would be my bookmark in my running log, and I'd move it and I'd move it. In college, I did some where I put them on the mirror, a little piece of paper, but I would see that goal every single day. The goals were appropriate, they were hard, but they were something that also wasn't going to define me. Some of my goals were performance goals, like I want to win state. Some of my goals were process goals, like I want to become a better teammate, or more like I want to become more flexible, or I want to up my mileage. I was someone who had a really hard time getting enough mileage in, so little process goals along the way. Enclosed cognition. This one I find really cool, and it hit home for me. I was never one of those people who needed to wear like the it outfit or anything, but when I ran, I wanted to feel part of something. And if you look at these girls in this picture, their enclosed cognition is they all have these shoes, and they don't race in them, obviously, but before meets, the day on their way to the meets, they wear these red high tops. My team in 1990s, we all did this as well, so they brought it back. But they just feel a part of something. They're not a group of girls who wants to wear a fancy sweatsuit as they're warming up. They want like the crazy tiger on the front, or the cat, or the dragon and the tie-dye. Like they want to be mismatched, but this piece is what brings them together. So finding that piece. The second I would put on my Oregon uniform, I just felt ready to go. So finding that piece of clothing that makes you feel really empowered is important as well. A power pose. I'd never thought about this before until I read Kara Goucher's book. Some people stand in the starting line and they put their shoulders back and they stand really still and they're really fierce. I remember that every time I got in the starting line, I would do this bounding, and I realized that was my power pose. It wasn't a pose, but it was like my power move. It gave me this sense of confidence that like I was going to do this. It was pretty cool. And so finding something like that, some people it's closing their eyes, taking a deep breath, figuring out some way to be like, I'm ready to go. Visualization techniques. I have never been good at this. It's something I've never really tried, but I realize I actually do it all the time. When I'm running, I'm always thinking about my outcomes. I'm always thinking about what I want to accomplish. I'm always picturing myself. Even now, I picture myself as a high schooler and a college racer being the best that I could. So visualizing, there's a lot of people who have found great methods laying down, closing their eyes, turning music on, whatever you can do to visualize yourself being successful. There's a lot of research that it really does work. Power words. Power words are those words you need when you are in the middle of the race. My girl Sophie, who we saw that picture of, I bet her word is brave. And as soon as she gets tired, she says brave, and it gives her that burst of energy. So finding a word that's quick, that's going to get you back on track is really important. And the last confidence technique is to have a community, right? To be together with people, to talk, to share things, to share your team goals, to have coffee after you go for a run, but also to be vulnerable, to be able to say, this is hard. This is something that it's not easy to navigate, because life is not going to be easy to navigate. If you can navigate this running, it's going to make you such a stronger female as well. But having those connections are really important. So one thing that we do in our team is we do something called Girls Talk. And that's one of our social connections. And here I am hunched over reading something, and here it's an optional thing for our team, but the team comes together, and we just, after practice, and we just read articles and we talk. And the whole purpose is for me to facilitate a conversation and really for the girls just to talk. It's not a time for me as a coach to tell them how to think or how to be, but it's just a time for them to talk about really hard topics, important topics, sometimes even goofy topics as well, but giving them a chance to be vulnerable. And I've seen more growth in them as humans in the past couple of years by implementing this as well. I've had a chance to do this with a couple schools. I've had a chance to help coaches create this. I think it's imperative. I think girls like to talk and they like to share their feelings and what they're going through. And so I think this is a great way. The couple girls here in this picture are now in college, and they've brought Girls Talks to their college team. It's not led by their coaches, but it's led by themselves, and they've found it really successful. So that's all I have to share with you guys today. I'm going to stop sharing because I know there's some questions. And let's see here. Okay. The first one says, you said you're a mom. How did pregnancy affect your running before and after giving birth? Was it hard? Yeah. So when I was pregnant, I really wasn't able to run. I don't know why. I think I'm compact in my stomach area. So it was just like pressing on like my pubic bone. So anytime I went for a walk or ran, it was so painful. So it was one of those things where running wasn't an option. I tried to walk too, and it just hurt incredibly bad. So I really just didn't do it very much. So then I took like 7 months off. I mean, I was able to run the first couple months until I was big. So coming back from it was hard because I've probably never taken 7 months of not running in my life. I was always a recreational runner. So it was hard coming back. But I feel like it's what you would say to any person who's running for the first time. You've just got to get through those first 3 weeks. And for me, it was like, okay, I just need to get out the door 4 days a week for a couple weeks. And then I need to get out the door 5 days a week. And sometimes my run would only be 10 minutes, but I just had to get that habit. And I feel like that's what I'm telling my girls now after quarantine. You just got to get out the door. Like as soon as you get that consistency in, it will come back. And so it did come back. So, that's a good question. Do I use the identity pie with our athletes? I have not yet, but I absolutely intend to. We were doing Girls Talks all through quarantine. We were doing them twice a week, and they got tired. And so we took a little break. So we're going to start Girls Talks up again in August, and I absolutely plan to. We plan to do them with the boys as well. I think it's really imperative. But I kind of want to do them in person because I think it'll be more reflective so I can actually see. I mean, over Zoom, they could hold them up, I guess, but I want to make sure that we can have truthful conversations with them as well. Great question. So it says, let's see, as a coach, How do you help girls on a team who, because of different cultural backgrounds, are not allowed to use tampons? It can be incredibly awkward, uncomfortable to race with pads. It can impact what kinds of uniform bottoms are offered. I always ask girls on our team individually this question to make sure I know, but I think it's important that all coaches of girls are aware of this. I think it's such a great culturally appropriate thing for coaches to think about. We haven't brought it up as a topic. We've definitely had girls on the team who have worn different clothing for different reasons. Some of them possibly could be because of this. Most of them are cultural reasons. And so feeling like all athletes understand that their journey, it needs to be right for them, is the most imperative thing. So creating a culture where everyone feels like they have the courage to be able to come to me or our head coach or any coach and say, this isn't appropriate for what I need, is really important. And I think maybe it's something that we need to be more aware of as coaches. I absolutely agree with this, thinking about, addressing that out loud. We all feel as coaches that we've created this culture of trust and people can come to us, but being able to say that out loud is probably something we need to implement. So thank you for that. What are some of the topics we talk about? How do you lead into your topics? You mentioned reading an article. Yes. So our topics are pretty much anything, mainly puberty. Whenever I ask the girls, what do you want to talk about? They're always like, more about puberty. So puberty, periods, menstruation, bone health, mental toughness, confidence. We talk about positive and negative influences in our lives. And I do start with an article. I think it's imperative that they have something to read, so they don't have to be super vulnerable at first. They can talk about the article without having to refer to themselves. And then if they feel safe, they can do that as well. I'm not sure if Allison, if you are a coach, or Camille, sorry, Allison, Camille. I am, during our Wildwood clinic this coming week, I am doing a whole hour presentation on how to run a girls talk from the beginning to the end with all the different variables. So if you're interested in that, that would be a place, or message me on Wildwood Running and I can give you some more information. Just during puberty, if we plateau or on a downgrade, how do you suggest we cope? So Allison's asking, if you're plateauing, if you're on a downgrade, how do we cope with it? The only advice I can give you is to understand the process. And a lot of coaches I've talked to have said, well, I don't want to talk about this because it might not happen. And that's absolutely true. This might not happen for you. But I think knowledge is power, right? So the biggest thing for you to do is to understand who you are and where you are, and trying to find those people around you that can lift you. Your coaches can understand. And really that comes from this mental toughness to say, I need to understand that this is my body and I will come back. And there's so much research that shows that most females peak in their late 20s to early 30s. And that's because they're through puberty. And that's because their bones are stronger. That's because they've grown into themselves. Their body's now adjusted. So I think the biggest thing is patience. And the biggest thing is understanding yourself and just realizing how can you embrace who you are. And those are kind of my biggest tips. Hopefully that's helpful. But I will say it's not easy in any way. Does temporarily pausing all exercise guarantee the end of female athlete triads? Some great symptoms. Great question. And I think tomorrow you guys is it tomorrow, Chuck, that you're doing the Red S talk?
Eden is going to speak on that on Friday morning. It's going
Friday.
to be a great session.
Okay. So she'll be a really great person to talk to this about. And this, I think the answer to me would be no, not necessarily. It's not a guarantee in any way. There could be a lot of other things going on. And that's where a pediatrician would be really important, or a doctor would be really important. But ask this question again on Friday. I think she'd be the best person to hear that. Okay, best advice for training with your period. If you haven't read the book Roar, and maybe Chuck can put that in, Roar, it's by Dr. Stacy Sims. It came out a couple of years ago. She's been doing research for years, and it blew my mind. I was just like, are you kidding me? Why didn't I know any of this? But this is a really great way to start with understanding your cycle. I am also someone who gets cramping and bloating, and there's ways you can change your diet. There's ways you can adjust your training based upon different parts of your cycle. It's hard for a coach. Like, I've been trying to figure out, we have 140 athletes on our cross country team, 250 on our track team. How can I really modify workouts based upon all these girls and their cycles? It's really not doable. But I think for you to understand what you're dealing with, where you are in your cycle, is power of the knowledge, right? So being able to say, you know what, gosh, I'm in my high hormone phase. This is where I'm most tired. This is where I don't recover. I'm also I'm bloating because I'm going to get my period. There's a lot of things you can do to create knowledge in that. And so that book would be a really great read. She's also done quite a few podcasts. So if you look up Stacy Sims, you can find a lot of information there.